I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of Number 4, any agenda changes? None? Okay. 5, consent agenda. A, April 18th, 2024 regular board meeting minutes. B, presentation of accounts and other claims against the village. C, final invoice for new meters, 120 new meters. D, discussion and possible action on no mow May resolution R-14-24. Are there any questions?
In the minutes, that Ernie Brenneman's name is spelled wrong. I don't know if you want to. It's Broeneman. Thank you. You're welcome.
If there are no more questions, I would need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve consent agenda.
I'll second.
Roll call, Jim?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Motion carried. 6, pre-registered citizens to be heard. Limit 5 minutes. A, state your name and address. B, comments to be limited to 5 minutes. C, pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.832 and 19.842, the board's role is to listen to public comments and not ask questions, discuss, or take action regarding pre-registered citizens' comments. Are there any citizens?
Yes, Mary Ellen Algrim, 665 Commerce Drive.
So I guess I'm here to just restate our position at Algrim Explosives for the pavement around our shop, which for us it is not a reasonable request due to our massive equipment, which is on tracks. It will totally chew up the pavement. We've been told multiple times it could be even within one summer, depending upon how hot the summer is. We purposely built in the industrial park to protect our business. We're here to serve the state of Wisconsin and to employ people. And so what I would propose is that we continue with our excellence in keeping up our property within the industrial park. We have put up berms, a significant berm on the backside, which kind of butts up to Wild Winds, which that berm went up well before that development ever got approved. We also have put up a berm on the north end, and within 2 weeks, I do have an excavator that can come in and start putting up a berm on the south end. We don't feel that a berm in the very front, which would be adjacent to Commerce Drive, would be a wise decision based on the fact that there is traffic on Commerce Drive. We feel that that could be a hazard as far as coming in and out of our shop. We could block someone's view of us, or maybe we don't have a good visual of them, even though Commerce Drive is not a heavily used street. But basically, we're proud to be in the industrial park, and we feel that every single business in the industrial park is proud and that they keep up their property really well. So I just think to pay for particularly us, it is not reasonable to do so.
Thank you.
And then Hetland Mold, 352 9th Street.
I'm here to just speak to the 9th Street proposed speed changes. Those of you that have been on the board for a while know that I've brought this up in the past, and I'm happy to see it on the agenda. I live at 352 Nye. My concern is the safety. The speeding has been a huge issue for a long time for both pedestrians and bikers, as well as drivers. And then a warning going down to 25. And if you could make the 25 as far west as possible, just to get people to slow down, because there's more development happening out there. I've noticed coming into town on M, I believe there's a sign that has 25 miles an hour ahead and it's flashing. That would help. Any kind of alerts would be great. I don't think the 25 mile an hour on the south side is seen. It's right next to the house. That's the first house in Hortonia, which is right next door to our home. I don't think people see it, or they choose not to see it, even though there's flags on it. Other things that might help is if the speed monitors that were donated are great, except because of the amount of traffic, the batteries go dead very quickly. So they're up there, but they're not recording anything. So if solar could be adapted to it. I know I talked to Chris about this one time, and that's a significant expense, but if something could be done to upgrade those. And then I just wanted to point out too, I mentioned this to Nathan earlier this week, the map that you have in the packet I think is incorrect. I think it has 25 not starting until Lincoln Street, when in fact it's supposed to, at this point it starts just past the first house in Hortonia on the south side, if that makes sense. That's where the sign is. So, yeah, just, it's a huge safety concern, and it's been like this for years. I know there's regular walkers and bikers, and it's just really scary, especially for kids getting on and off buses and everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. Okay.
We will move to 7, committee reports. A, library board. I believe Ally had something in the packet. We'll go to 8, unfinished business from previous meetings. There is none. 9, new business. A, discussion on Nye Street, proposed speed changes.
So, public safety met probably over a month ago now, and wanted to propose changing the speed limits on Nye Street to move the 45 miles per hour to west of the industrial park drive. So this would basically make it 35 miles per hour from Industrial Park Drive going east until where it currently goes to 35 or 245, which is on Nye Street by Midway, to then go to 25 at that point. That's what's being proposed then all the way through to Nash Street.
Does anyone have questions or comments?
I have a question for the chief. So you had mentioned, and I don't remember if I went to that public safety meeting or not, I think I did, that it's more effective to go from, and not to necessarily take it in increments, is to like like Pat was suggesting, going from 45 right to 25 versus 45 to 35 to 25. I don't know what's more effective, I guess.
I guess I've seen it both ways. I think that it's more effective going from the 45 to 25 because it's not a gradual. It's, you're stopping it right away. Where they have to slow down immediately. That road is wide.
So I think coming into town, and correct me if I'm wrong, so if you're coming from the south on M, which turns into Nash, it goes from 55 to 25.
Mhm.
And then if you're coming into town from, on Double J, formerly 15, that goes from 45 to 25.
Right,
Right.
right here it does for
To see it be 45 to 25.
I agree, and I think that's what it should be. But we have to remember that it's gotta be 45 to 25, and directly across from it, it's gotta be that same speed.
Yeah, the
So
road's being
we
two
can't-
different speeds on either side of the
We
street.
can't put 35 across from a 25.
So are you proposing that we go 25 all the way out to the edge of town, or that we go 25 to 45 and get rid of the 35?
I would get rid of the 35 entirely. I would say 25.
Midway?
Well, so there's foot traffic that comes off of like Birch Street yet, right?
That's pretty much where the end of the foot traffic
The
is.
end of the foot traffic.
Yeah.
That's what I was looking at, is like foot traffic. So if you could have it at 25 where there's foot traffic, you know, doing 25 up until even Birch. And then, but then
You're accelerating next to the fire ups.
you're accelerating next to a fire station. So are you better off taking it all the way to Industrial Park Avenue? I just don't know how. I mean,
It gets pretty wide open out there.
yeah.
I think if you lower it to 25, you're gonna have a lot of problem with people inadvertently speeding. I mean, the road gets really, really wide, and it gives you a sense of security. And if you have a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit in there, I drive it every day. I mean, I live in that neighborhood. So if you have a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit in there as you start going towards Industrial Park and stuff like that, I think you're gonna run into, a lot of people are gonna speed without intending to speed.
What about just west of the fire station? I mean, Jack's here. I mean, do you have any opinion on this, Jack, about the speed in front of the fire station, or does that affect you guys?
Doesn't really matter to me, I mean, it doesn't really affect us at all. I'm going 10 over no matter what.
Well, for calm. But I mean, but it really doesn't day to day. It doesn't really affect you
I'm just being
guys.
honest,
Yeah.
I'm going 10 over. That's really what it is. I would see, I would think the increments would be better, especially going to the industrial park, but that's, you know. Cars don't pull over when we're going to the firehouse anyway, so.
I think the biggest concern is safety towards where Pat lives and more of the residential area, so if you can just make it safer heading east, that's worth it to, even on the other side of the road, if you're heading west, it's 25 miles per hour. It's just, it's understood that people are traveling at 25 miles per hour.
To Birch?
I
Or to
understand.
where?
To,
Sorry, I didn't know.
to the industrial park. Maybe to Birch if Birch you feel like encompasses enough of the area of concern.
I think Birch is the last of the homes, right? It's the only that's the last exit point for homeowners.
For bike riders, walkers.
What do we have any accident? Do we have any accidents out there?
No.
Where it's 35 or even 45? Okay. So, I mean, I do this, I drive this, like I said, I drive this every single day, multiple times a day. I would be in favor of the 35 stretch. If it turns out that it doesn't work out, it's pretty easy for us, in my opinion, to remove the 35-mile-an-hour speed limit and just, you know, go to a 25 if it turns out that that just doesn't work. I mean, it's not like we have to, you know, redo everything. You just redo a little placard on the sign.
You could just do one sign instead of two signs.
Well, right now there's a sign up there for 25 and a sign for 35 and a sign for 45.
Go 25. It would be 45 out there, 25.
Yeah.
So just a thought, I mean, a lot of times people hit a 25-mile-an-hour speed zone and they're not going 25 at the time, but they're slowing down. If we pushed that 25-mile-an-hour start a little further to the west, it's more likely that they would be going closer to 25 when they hit that area where Pat's discussing. Because you're in a 25-mile-an-hour speed zone, correct?
Open, there's less distraction. The issue with where coming from the industrial park going into that area is the 25-mile-per-hour sign where it is located right now is very hard to see.
Yeah.
And it's not usually until you're into this area that you start to notice the roads shrinking and you're going way too fast for that area. The issue is if you put 25 out way out there, people don't follow that. They're not going to. And you're dropping a speed limit from 20 miles per hour difference and change. And it's going to be really hard to stay at 30 miles per, or at 25 to 30 miles per hour from Industrial Park Drive all the way to that area.
Could a compromise be that instead of at Brookwood, could it be at Midway? That whole 25, 35, you know what I mean? Like, it's
Right.
compromise.
So realistically, it's right before Midway is where the 45 mile per hour sign is right now. I think part of the issue with what Chris was alluding to in the past with the accelerating from 25, 35, 45 is that's within a few hundred feet that you go from 35 to 45 miles per hour, which makes no sense because then you're just basically holding, accelerating as fast as you can to hit that speed. So if it's spaced out enough, it's not as bad of an issue. And it's the same thing we're going to be eventually doing with Main Street coming into town from Greenville, is it's going to, instead of going from 45 to 25 by the Gilberts, it's going to go to 35 over by Kelly Way. So the gradual is not bad if it's spread out.
So does the village limit end at industrial?
The village roadway, which we are in control of on Nye Street, ends at Industrial Park.
Okay.
Looking at the map, just so that I can understand. So where you're putting that 25 or that 35, 35 will start here, 25 starts here going into town. Is that somewhere between Midway and Brookwood, or is that at Brookwood, or?
So you're going into town. 25 would start basically right after Midway. So the sign would be pretty much
Like near Midway.
Right.
It's just hard for me to tell on that. Yeah.
right. We don't really have that good of graphics.
No.
So
Well, they're very good, very explained. I just don't know where that placement is, and that's where I
Right.
need a little help.
It's not that big of a stretch anyway. I think anywhere in between probably fits the need.
Any other comments?
Can it be 25 out to Birch? Why are we taking it back all the way to Brookwood? It's like still residential.
I think that's because that's where the road, the road widens so much out there. And that's where it's hard to control the speed.
I'm trying to think of foot traffic. Do you get much foot traffic from Birch, or do you get the majority? I see when I drive through there as well, that there's foot traffic coming from Brookwood. I don't know, Pat, maybe do you have any experience with where do you feel the foot traffic?
I'm not sure. There, I would say the majority probably comes off of Brookwood, but people are walking and biking
Yeah.
the whole route.
There is. There's some that comes off of Birch, but more of it comes, I'd say, I would agree with Pat, more of it comes off of Brookwood. But when you come off of Birch, which is the street that I drive on, the road is double T or Nye Street right there is very wide. Almost all of the foot traffic stays on the north side of the road, so it doesn't really cause a lot of problem. I took my kids biking on that even when they were little. You typically don't run into, because there isn't any place for people to park out there, and because it's so spaced out and the houses have
You can influence, people notice, oh, it's 25, the street is safer, you might see more folks walking all the way over to Charlie's and stuff. They're like, I'm not gonna walk that right now because it's not safe.
it's very safe.
It's not safe.
It's very safe. I took my little kids walking on it all the time. It's very
That-
safe.
That
And-
just gives her statement that it's been
Well,
a
we're-
safety issue for a few years.
But where Pat lives, that's after the road narrows.
I'm just looking at the whole area where,
I am too,
making
but you're
making
trying to
neighborhoods more walkable. Like, this is a bigger picture.
I understand.
Pedestrian friendly.
I understand. It is very pedestrian. If you go drive out there's a lot of people walking and biking. Because the road is so wide, it's very walkable. It's very walkable, it's very pedestrian friendly.
So what's the compromise here?
Well, I think moving the 25 way up to Birch puts us right back to where we were, where you're going 25, 35, 45 right away. Because if you go from Birch to Industrial Park, there's nothing there, right? So you might, then there's no point in doing that, right? So I think the proposed solution of going 25 between Midway and Brookwood at some point is probably the best solution. I mean, and you're looking at going to 30 coming into town, going to 35 starting at Industrial Park, which makes a lot more sense as well.
Are we bringing this back again for a vote? So basically, we're just discussing tonight.
Yeah, we'd have to come back
Yeah.
with an ordinance change and
If
Right.
we could, when we bring this back, Chief, is there anything that you can pull, any traffic, any information, whether that be citations from this stretch? I mean, I get it, it's based on the speed that it is now, or if there's any, Jim was asking about accidents. Is there any data we can pull?
There's no accidents, I can tell you that, because everything comes across my desk. I may be able to pull some of the information from the speed board. I mean, at one point we had it on Midway. Now we have it on either the north side or the south side of Nye Street, closer to, because we moved the speed board from Midway to the 25 mile an hour limit to try to get people, because when it's flashing, usually it tells people to start slowing down. So I can try to pull some data from there.
What I'm specifically looking for is, so like in that, so if somebody's doing, let's say, 48 and a 25, or somebody's doing 57 and a 35, you know what I mean? I'm looking like how many over, and not after they've seen the judge and things have been reduced, that kind of
No.
thing, like the
This-
actual citation.
Right. The speed,
Yeah.
the speed signs, it comes across as you dump it into an Excel program, and then you can see at what time of day, how many cars are going past
Yeah.
that sign, and then you can tell what the speed limits are. You can tell what the greatest speed limit was, what the least speed limit was, what the average speed limit is there.
That's what I'm looking for. You know, like how fast are people truly driving through there, number one, and where? You know,
Right.
where was that speed board? Was that, you have more than one location in that stretch, don't you?
Well, I can rate currently, it's almost across from each other. So the ones at the house right before the vacant field,
Mhm.
like when they're coming into town, that's got the flags on it. And then the other one's closer to Lincoln Street. So it's down to the east and on the other side of the road. So we're either picking up traffic that's going eastbound or traffic that's going westbound.
I think that'll help us.
But then I can go back and look at historical traffic, for when we had it on Midway.
I think that would help.
And
Don't you think
see-
that would help? Seeing truly what are the speeds going through there, you know? What are the violations happening, or what that speed board is picking up?
Oh, I already know. I drive, like I said, I drive it multiple times every day.
You have the data, so you've pulled
I
the
mean,
data for
I live
Jim?
right off of Birch.
No, okay.
So, I mean, I see that flashing sign every single time I'm usually down to about 29 when I get to the sign. But it is really hard where that speed limit turns to 25. It's very difficult because you're in that widened zone, right?
On a road that's wide, I'm not misinterpreting what 25 miles per hour means.
There's DOT standards that really say basically how you should design a road, depending on the speed, right? So that's why when you go into neighborhoods that you have curb, gutter, you might have some parking. Those roads usually aren't large enough to have like large amounts of traffic because you have parking on both sides. You probably don't have enough for 2 vehicles to go in between at the same time in some of these subdivisions. But these minor or major collector roads are usually designed a little differently to support that higher traffic number. They're not as pedestrian friendly, but that's kind of the issue. And also the fact that you have farms on the salt. I think when they're talking about the wideness, they're talking about the road size doesn't change, it's the view that you see when you're driving and when you're
Like on the bypass, it's the
Right,
same
so
issue we have on the bypass, right?
if these farms ever develop, then you could easily see an argument to dropping it lower. I guess I think it's gonna be problematic, but I don't have control over this. This is your guys' opinion on what you guys want to do. I would suggest that whatever you guys are proposing that we bring to the next meeting to let us know so that, well, we wouldn't bring it to the next meeting, it'd be a month from now because we'd want to send another letter out to the residents saying what it's going to do. So if you guys are going to try to do 25 miles per hour from industrial park, that's going to get maybe a different response than doing 35 from industrial park. So I think it would be better for us to send the notice out correctly rather than waiting for that night to decide.
Is tonight's meeting, was there a notice sent out about tonight?
Yes.
So, okay,
To all residents within 500 feet of that.
I think that's what was talked about
Stretch.
at that meeting, yeah. I just think it's fair to, maybe to look at some data. I don't think there's anything wrong with looking at it, at least we'd understand, well, what is the traffic actually doing out there, I drive it too, I drive it all the time, but and I catch myself speeding, but you gotta catch yourself doing it,
Yeah, but just because there's a lot of speeders doesn't necessarily mean that it should be a certain.
No, but I think it would
Like-
give us an idea of, so traffic coming in is a bigger problem than traffic coming out. So like, when we're looking at that 30, possible 35, where do we start it, where do we, type of thing, it just might give us a little bit more of an insight.
The current locations probably won't, because Lincoln Street, you're still at 25. The question would be, like, further out, like after Brookwood, if you're saying going out of town, and what are people doing speeds-wise there? My guess is they're probably getting up to 40. I mean, that's normally what we end up posting at when we're going through to go out to the industrial park. But
I'm curious too, is it traffic coming into town and traffic, like, is it that much different? Like, so the perception is it's closer, and I get it, that feeling of there's more houses and it's closer together, you should go slower. But if people are still doing 40 miles an hour through that section, then I don't know.
I would guess we're gonna see it being faster coming into town than it is going out, because you're going from the smaller,
Certain times of day.
yeah, coming from the smaller enclosed space out to a broader space
I think the
versus,
time of day is gonna be a big deal.
probably, school hours are probably bad,
Working.
working, yeah.
Commuters.
Mhm.
If I had to guess, I would say that going out of town, people are probably speeding up faster because you have that such a short 35. Literally, you're 25, and then it says 35, and you can see the 45 right ahead. So I suspect that if you were to put the speed thing out there, that you would find people already driving, 40, 42, they're definitely going 45 by the time they get to the 45-mile-an-hour speed limit up there. So, coming into town, you're already going And then you're gonna see people that are, you know, your maximum speed is higher than what you would like it to be, which is what Pat sees. But when you're coming down to the 25, as you go further into town, then you start to see it slow down somewhere.
So,
Well,
I
I've
think-
observed it has happened. We've done it with Jack.
does
Just noticed
anyone
that
want to
question.
speak on this that lives out on that road? Okay, go ahead, sir.
I'm at 491, so I'm right where it's basically 35 to 45 right now. It's absolutely terrible. We've talked about moving because it's that bad. I see people get passed 3-4 times a day. I think, personally, I like what Grace is saying to move 25 all the way out. There's too much foot traffic. There's too many people riding bikes. I have a 2-year-old kid that rides a bike in the front driveway. People don't care. They speed right by 50 miles an hour because that window is so short. There's a lot of kids, there's a lot of dogs, a lot of people, a lot of bikers. I don't like the step up because people are gonna step it up from 25 to 35, so they're gonna see that 35 sign, they're already gonna be going 40. I think it should just keep going 25. I don't wanna be in another acceleration zone because it's literally gonna be right in my front yard.
Sir, did you have something?
Yes. William Romer, I live at 3779. Every morning, we can see the 25-mile sign from our front window. And cars coming into town, they don't put the brakes on until that light starts flashing. And then they basically lock up their wheels and slow down. It is a hazard, and I would like to see the 25 mile go out all the way to this industrial, is my opinion.
Yes?
I would agree with exactly what they say. I live at 3719 Street, and there's a lot of kids that ride their bike and walk home down that street every single day. And I mean, I don't let our 2-year-old play out by the street. I mean, that's a prime area where people are getting on it or hitting the brakes. I think it should go out further.
It's not so much a problem with people going out of town because there's that adjustable, and you're accelerating anyway because everybody knows it's going to be 45. But coming into town, they hit 45 all the way until that sign starts getting their attention. And then the brake lights come on.
Yes?
Could you work with, who's in charge of past industrial park? What township or is it?
That'd be Hortonville.
Could you work with Hortonia and put a 35 up way past Wildwinds, you know, closer to T? And then that would already start the slowdown way out there? Because if they're coming in from 45, they are going fast.
Yeah. I mean, anything's an option. It's, you gotta convince them of it.
And then it wouldn't be such a harsh slowdown, you know, so that they have that 35 way out there, at least at T, and then you could hit that 25 where, you know, and not be so abrupt.
Yeah. I mean, anything's possible. We gotta convince them of it, but yeah.
So when this comes back, this is only for discussion tonight, when this comes back with discussion and possible action, you were saying another notice would go out?
Yeah, so it'd be coming back a month from now, so we can get another notice with ample time for the residents. 2 weeks is too quick.
Because I think this is really helpful information, having the residents, you know, share their experiences. I think it's helpful.
So then you're gonna contact Hortonia, Chris, you're gonna get us some information and letters are gonna go out, so then we can just move this on to a month from now.
That's fine.
Is that good with everyone?
How do you want me to post the proposed change? Do you want it at 25 at Industrial Park Drive, so that
I would send out the two options,
Yeah.
that we're discussing the two options, that way if somebody wants to,
They're passionate.
if somebody is in favor or objects to it, then they can have the idea that, look, there's two things going on, and maybe I need to.
Subdivision.
So the agreement should have been in your packet.
Does anyone have questions?
It's the developer
So
who.
where did we land?
So
There were multiple.
okay, so basically, I'll come to, there is you should have had a page, basically. So it says, village will extend water and sewer to the subdivision. We will buy outlot 1 minus the stormwater pond at the rate that the developer purchases the land for. The village will pay for the fixing the stormwater issue created from the installation of Grandview. Village will extend sidewalk from where it currently ends at Crestview, basically all the way to the entrance of the subdivision. The village will pay for the park fees, and then the developer and the village the developer will get 65% of the taxes in the TID from that development. The developer will have 5 years to complete the project, all 32 homes, and that's kind of where it ended. The developer agrees to have $9.6 million of improvements by the end of 2028. His plan right now is to do it within 2 years.
Okay. So, what was in our original discussion, we had a break even of we had different options of 6 years, 9 years, 15 years.
Yeah, I mean,
Which of these potentials did we end up with?
so a lot of that is dependent on how we fund it. So basically, depending if we take out loans, which TID funds, so for instance, TID 3, which funded the installation of Grandview Road, will pay the $70,000. So that saves that TID some money, and we don't have to take out a loan necessarily for that. So basically, we should be netting, once it's fully built out, it should take less than 7 years for us to get our income back
Okay.
fully. Then we have 13 years of profit or so, 12, depending on the timeline,
So the agreement is for how many years after that, for the 65%?
to 19
years?
or sorry, to 2042. The village could also extend that TID 3 extra years, which this agreement ends anyway, but the TID is still functioning, so, which we would get full improvement.
We don't have any issues or potential issues or loopholes or problems that we could potentially have regarding curb gutter, road completion like we've had in previous?
No, the developer is in charge of doing full installation. The first 2 years, once the The road is put in at a gravel road. The developer will still maintain that gravel road for 2 years while installing all the houses. He's got 24 months from the first potential building permits going out to put in the full road. Purchase the land from the current owner. C, which is the site plan, which we have, and then Exhibit E, which is our offer to purchase the outlot. Those would be in the final agreement prior to signing. But, yeah.
So are we doing a motion or waiting for all this?
We would prefer a motion to approve the developer's agreement pending the changes discussed.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Pending the village approval of the final plat, sorry. It's on the,
Okay.
it's right here on the bottom, if you want.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the developer's agreement pending the changes discussed above, pending a village approval and pending a village approval of the final plat.
I'll second.
Roll call. Jim?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carried. C, discussion and possible action on North Mill Street reconstruction project bid submittals.
So we had a public meeting on the project last week. We had got our bids in last week. We got 5 bidders on the project. The low bid was Donnie Parker at $586, $957.06. And our engineer's gone over everything they submitted and their bid looks good. So our recommendation would be to award it to Donnie Parker.
If there are no questions, we would need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the bid from Parker Excavating for the North Mill Street reconstruction in the amount of $586,957.06.
I'll second.
I have a question. Is it possible that this bid increases ever, or is it like, this is?
So they have, if you look at, there's 68 items in their bid, so there's unit pricing on it. So if, for say, they don't need So with the direction that we got kind of at the last board meeting, we did have problems finding 3 bids for this effluent pump. We were able to get one from B&M for a brand new pump, which is basically $31,600 compared to the $17,000 it cost to rebuild the pump. We reached out to other firms. One was Sable Mechanical, and basically they just told us it's not even worth their time to put a bid in if we have Crane Engineering, because Crane Engineering is so familiar with our plant, and they would usually come in at least 10 to 15% under whatever they would be able to put together. Another question that was raised was the life expectancy of these pumps, and I talked to Crane Engineers today about it, and basically the rebuild has basically the exact same life expectancy as a new one. They're replacing all the bearings, all the shafts, everything internally is basically new. So for the rebuild, you're basically looking at about half to even less than half of what it would cost to purchase a new one. And again, with the familiarity of Crane with our pumps in our system, I think that is probably the best option to go with there. And we also do have that amount budgeted in our CIP for this.
So is it the 17 or is it the 18, 72?
18. Yeah.
So we're looking for a motion.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve the bid from Crane Engineering for the effluent pump in the amount of $18,072.
I'll second it.
Roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion carried. F, discussion and possible action on CSM for parcel 240043100 and 240043101.
So there's a memo in the packet and kind of a map in the packet of the CSM, but I did get the CSM document, which I will pull up here. Hopefully it's somewhat visible, I don't know. the area we're talking about in the CSM is basically the darker, those little dots there. I'm just gonna go up to the screen and kind of explain it.
The second page doesn't really go that way. Trees and brush, and cleaned up that edge. The issue is we have concrete, some of their concrete is in our property line, and we're concerned with us keeping that. So the idea would be to basically come over 5 feet, deed over that property to the homeowners, and then trade out this same square footage, but from the back for the village. This would benefit us for extra room for snow storage. Most of our snow, when it's plowed, is usually stored in this area. So realistically, if the homeowner's lot line stayed the same and put in a fence, we'd potentially be coming up against their fence line when plowing. So it's the same amount of square footage, and it cleans up our area and gives us a little extra room on the backside where we need it.
So the two obvious questions, obviously Claire's here, so I assume you've talked to her and this has been discussed already at this point.
Yep.
And two, this is the second situation in less than a month that we've seen on property, adjoining property has buildings or structures on our land and we're not maintaining. I think we probably should do an effort maybe to look at all the village-owned property and see where that, because we're gonna keep having this otherwise, and we should probably come up with a solution for like all of them, if there is any more.
There's a good amount of ours, but there's a ton of others as well.
Residential
So-
something, but.
All right, so the idea is to kind of take care of a few each year, because normally, if it's not, it's kind of been problematic in the past to clean up because some people think we're taking their land, which has been the issue with one of the issues we have on Dewey Street, which we've never really came to an agreement on.
I think there's unique challenges to each one.
Yeah, I just think if we can identify them, and then at
Yep.
least if they come up, we're prepared, and it's not like, oh, we're doing a bunch of, we already know, we've identified.
Yep.
It also is probably good if those landowners come up and say, I plan to build a fence, or whatever. Now we can address that pretty easily.
Right.
You know, it's not such a big deal if we're not doing anything to the property, but the second they want to do something to that property, or that's when it comes to a head, right?
Yes.
I'm going back 2 pages and show a picture.
How do we end up with these in the first place?
So,
I mean, doesn't the building permit process
no.
supposed to prevent this from happening?
So realistically, it's because when the surveys were first done, years ago, they didn't have GIS. So basically, you have these issues where these surveyors have their lines that don't exactly match the topography of the area, or not topography, but the layout of where they should be located. So they didn't really have a great way of.
Aren't there restrictions on how close you can build to the property? I mean, because
Well,
you can't
right,
put up
but
a
that's
fence.
but most of these are in old areas, right?
Okay.
So they're in areas that they didn't necessarily have good ways to determine where one's property ended and one started. Normally, there's stakes in the ground, but if the stakes have been removed, like happens sometimes, it's without basically surveyors, which 50 years ago they didn't have anything, or I think.
An example. So, for example,
Yeah.
like downtown, those buildings are literally like touching each other, or they have very small space. If you look at the actual GIS, or you look, and I've been witness to some of the survey and owned some of the property on the in the downtown, there's sometimes almost nearly a foot that you own into the other person's building. My own property, where our house is, we pay for a certain amount of footage, or according to our taxes, this is what it is. There's actually like a few less feet, and we've had it surveyed, and they're just like, this is just how it is. We found the corner, and that's how many feet we come out, and it's just, they're all messed up.
So if you look at this right now, I mean, currently, technically, we own this little
Mhm.
piece of their slab, so that would clean that up.
And
At
this
one
property was
point-
purchased.
Didn't Reinders own that house and this property? So that's probably why it wasn't a. So they built,
The structure.
right,
And this, when was this land purchased? I mean, I know the building was put up in what, 2014? So
13.
wasn't this land purchased, I believe, from the, maybe I'm maybe misspeaking, but what Jeannie's saying makes sense,
Mhm.
because it was, at the time,
It's the same
it was
thing
all one
where-
owner,
where,
right.
Peterson's house is.
Mhm.
I mean, all those were one property and now they're all jacked up.
And I think that's where we're running into difficulty now with lot lines. So,
we don't know how to.
Just the survey, which is estimated probably around 2,000 or so.
To be absorbed by the village.
any other
And
questions?
what's the benefit to that then?
Well, I mean, realistically, there's very little benefit for the homeowner.
Okay.
Basically, if we own this land, we would have our options of keeping the cement slab, which we'd be liable to maintain, so we'd have to clear it for snow removal, salt, ice, because it would be a public area.
Okay.
Or we would have to cut out the concrete, which we're worried about because some of the stuff prior that we did rip out had rebar. We were able to use our excavator to get it out because we tested to make sure that they weren't connected underneath. This looks like it's connected. Most likely, I would be worried about cutting such a small strip with extra cracking and damage to the homeowner's property.
Breaking those, yeah.
Right. So I think our best solution is to just deed that over, and we get the benefit of having more room for snow storage.
It benefits us for additional storage for snow, for sure.
It's a one-to-one for basically square footage, so.
What's the concern?
Well, I just asked if there were any other expenses associated with this. Nathan said it's about $2,000 for the village for this, to have it resurveyed. So we would be paying $2,000 to take this little piece of land and get another piece that is the same size or similar.
To give away this piece of land.
Yeah, to give away, well, yeah, to give that
Trade it,
to trade it, yeah. So there's an expense associated with it.
But we are gaining room for snow removal.
But don't we already own the property straight back here?
Yeah.
We own a
typically-
sizable chunk back there, right?
Right. So the issue with that would be basically where the drains are. So our drains are over in that, right over by her property there.
Okay.
So, yeah, we could change the way we do snow removal. I think the guys they usually remove snow, I believe, the long way, which is easier for them, it gets them done quicker, I'm guessing, than having to do,
Okay.
you know.
I'm just looking for the reasoning.
No,
I mean, to somehow justify that it's worth $2,000 to swap it out. Okay.
Okay, then we would, if there aren't any more questions, we would need a motion on this.
How do you want that put?
to approve the CSM.
I'll make a motion to approve the CSM for parcel 24004310 and 2400431001.
I'll second that.
Roll call. Jim?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion carried. G, discussion and possible action on commercial club temporary handicap parking authorization.
I can take that one. So Jim Cliff reached out to me, requesting to have handicap parking for these 3 events, out on North Oak Street, on the west side of the road, for these time periods.
We've done this in the past. We would just need a motion to go ahead with this and accept it.
I'll make a motion to, do you want a motion for each date or a motion for all three of these dates is okay?
Well, it's all three of the dates, but then there's also the bike night. We might as well approve the bike night, having the cones and placards up there for that on Main Street.
I do have actually a really quick question before I make that motion. So all of these go through that, what is that one event? Like
Special
process?
event permit.
Special event type of thing? Is that one of the questions on there? I'm just wondering if, just the idea of maybe do we add that on there?
Well, the commercial club, they're renting it out to the American Legion, so do they still fill out?
No.
No.
So they don't fill out a special event permit because it's on their own property.
Okay.
If they needed public right away, so like blocking a road or like, you know, Dash Down Nash is probably one of the most common ones we do every year. But that's shutting down a whole road. So anytime they're using the public right away
Okay.
is usually when we normally get the special event permits.
Just a thought, trying to make it easier on those pubs. Okay.
I have a question. I'm just wondering why they don't use the parking spaces in their lot.
I think they use both.
Do they use a whole lot?
Well,
I mean, it would seem like
I know for the Harley raffle, they park all the bikes in that big huge lot.
Okay.
And then they have some handicap in there too. But then they use the handicap out on the road. Otherwise, you have somebody who's handicapped that's walking from John Street.
Yeah. Well, it seems
Yeah.
to make more sense to use
Yeah.
more of their
And I
parking
think-
space for handicap
right.
because you're not on the road
Right,
at all.
and I think with the Legion, you're gonna have more
Mm-hmm.
elderly,
More need.
more need for handicap.
Okay.
So I will make a motion, so is it granting permission for the DPW to do this, or granting permission for them to have handicap parking?
For them to have handicap.
Handicap parking, on June 22nd from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. for the American Legion Post 55, August 12th, 5 to 9 p.m. American Legion Post 55, August 17th, 3 p.m. to 10 p.m. Harley Raffle, as well as the bike night of August 15th on Main Street from 3 p.m. to bar closing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. H, discussion on industrial park covenants.
This was requested by a board member at the last meeting.
Yeah, thank you. I was researching and communicating with the business owners in the industrial park. After the last meeting, I gathered that some of them were worried. Some of them indicated they would go as far as not having their businesses here at the expense of a huge asphalt installation. And I want to reference the comprehensive plan just for a moment. In chapter 5, it's about economic development. This is from the new comprehensive plan. There's 5 strategies listed, and I'm not going to go over all 5 of them. I'm just going to go over one of them. And the 5 strategies to support economic development. One of them being to facilitate partnerships between local businesses and the government to leverage resources and expertise, and to collaborate with businesses to identify opportunities for joint initiatives. So I'm really viewing this as a joint initiative opportunity, and I think we should facilitate open and collaborative discussions with the business owners. And I had more questions that I didn't get to ask the first time this came up. We moved through it kind of quickly, so. One question being if it was just as simple as having the aggregate asphalt be a solution to the dust concern.
So it doesn't matter the concern the citizen brought up, we're stuck by the covenants and the wording of it. So it basically says in the covenants asphalt or concrete. In the old ones, the newer areas, which would encompass the horse farm and the Algram explosives and potentially a few others. It's similarly worded, but if you would want to add something like that type of language in, that could be added in, but you would have to amend anything that you guys do to amend the covenants. Each covenant would have to be amended a little differently. So the newer section would be a 2/3 vote by the property owners based on the property sizes, by the square footage, and the village board. The older sections would be 50% and the village board as well, in order to change those covenants. But the board has the ability to change them with consent with the property owners. That's the only way to basically not force them other than doing a variance. You can grant the variances. The question then is, are you gonna hold them others to it in the industrial park? If someone's, property who's currently paved starts going bad, are you gonna make them repave it while the other ones were allowed to keep theirs? So that's kind of the question and how you would handle that going forward, which you could do that and just grant variances when they come, or you could just change the covenants would be the preferred way to do it, so that it's fair across the board to all of the industrial park owners.
I'm still not sure on the ability to grant a variance too. I think that the proper way to approach this is to look at the covenants themselves and to potentially make changes to those covenants. So your comprehensive plan is talking about the future plan from a zoning context. And covenants don't fall into that category. Covenants are self-imposed limitations. So where I live, for example, the village is going to tell me that I can build my house X number of feet away from the street. That's a zoning regulation. The covenants that are in place on my property say I can't have a wooden fence. And the village doesn't have the ability to change that. The village allows wooden fences, but my subdivision does not. And so I think it's important to understand that difference. These documents are not perfect, and few are. But now, for the purpose of some finality and for handling this in a way that I think is procedurally and probably legally appropriate, what you would want to do is to potentially consider a change to those covenants. And so it was my understanding that there might be some sort of a meeting with the property owners and representatives of the board, and then it would come back to you. And it would be up to the property owners to ensure that they had the correct number of people there if they wanted to see a change. But even though that, I think the term, they talk about variances in one or both of those documents, I don't believe that the board has the authority to grant a variance in this
So, question.
situation.
It was brought to my attention that something like this normally would be if there was, if somebody wanted to appeal something in the covenant, that it would go to, and I believe in this it says the planning and zoning, because I know there's a question of why did this go to planning and zoning? It just didn't seem maybe the right fit. But the zoning board of appeals didn't exist at the time those covenants were created. Would it be typical that the zoning board of appeals would be the right fit for that? Or
Well, the zoning board of appeals is going to hear requests for variances, but again, this is not a proper request for a variance.
No, but if
Ordinance.
But if we do look at amending those covenants, would we want to switch that process? Would it?
I don't think so.
No?
I think that, like my wooden fence example, I purchased my property, and if I did my due diligence as a potential purchaser, I've looked at the history on that property, and I might be expecting expecting that my neighbor also is not going to be putting up a wooden fence. And so that's why you shouldn't necessarily be asking for a variance.
Okay.
They should be looking toward the restrictions that apply to us as a
whole.
subdivision.
Thank you. Okay.
And so I think, again, the reason that, and these are not perfect documents, but the reason that they are requiring a certain number of property owners to agree to a change is because in whatever is being requested, the neighboring property owners have a right to speak on that too and to make a decision. It sounds like, I mean, I'm not sure who may be for or against what's being requested here. It seems like there have been a number of property owners who have come and have asked for relief from this, so, you know, maybe that's not a hard thing for them to do, to gain that sort of support from a standpoint of property owners as a whole. As I was communicating with every business owner, they did each indicate that they would love to have us collaborate with the property owners. They definitely are happy to find a solution that's amicable. Yeah. So, and that's, I'm just trying to provide you with the clearest path forward, and I think that's what it would be.
I think, I guess my only point I want to say is that in that effort, obviously we want both sides to win, right? We obviously had somebody make a complaint, and we don't want them to be upset either, because they have an equal right in the village too to not have dust or whatever the issue may be. So I guess, I mean, I appreciate that the berms are going up, because obviously that's an effort in the right direction. So whatever changes that we would make or propose regarding the covenant changes, which is what I'm hearing is the appropriate process here, I would just want to consider not just saying you don't need anything, maybe having some sort of agreement that we work with the business owner to say, okay, we have to do some sort of due diligence, right, to make sure that the homeowners are protected too, or things like that, because otherwise we're ignoring one complaint to resolve another, you know what I mean? And no one, and you're just picking who's winning. You want to say winning.
Can I just ask a question on the prior variances? Does this make the prior variances null and void then? Like PSI who had a variance, does that eliminate that variance if you're saying variances aren't legal?
I don't know anything about that situation, what variance they have.
It's for this.
But what was
Right.
their?
They were granted a variance at the time of sale to purchase the property, their yard. Basically, for the material storage was allowed to be gravel with the trade-off that they put in slatted fencing around it.
So, I mean, I guess I don't know. I can't offer a legal opinion on that. If another member of the industrial park or the business park thought that was improperly granted, that would be between them.
But I feel like that's sort of like what I'm saying, you know, they did something alternatively to try to avoid, you know, the slanted fence stuff will help stop some of the flow too, right? It at least breaks it up. So there was an effort there. So I think that's what we just need to consider, that as we're looking at modifying a covenant to be maybe a little more open to other options, not just it's this or this, period.
And perhaps that was the thinking here, right? Because it's not just a member of 2/3 of the business owners or the property owners. It's 2/3 or half of the property owners and the board.
Yeah.
And the board's participation is likely in the interests of the surrounding properties who are not within that park.
I wasn't part of it then, but I would hope that was considered when they said, okay, that's another option. And I hope that's what we would do for the covenant changes.
I guess I'm speaking as a concerned board member for the businesses, because when I'm hearing we would tentatively leave, I mean, you're losing huge assets. And just open the door for communication. And, you know, that this is being revisited in.
So I think August 8th is the 120 days. I just was able to start reaching out to some of the, well, I reached out to one so far, but I just started basically reaching out to the businesses. So if I haven't talked to you, like most of you, you will probably be getting a call to kind of discuss your thoughts on some options potentially, and then basically at that meeting, which will be sent out to all the businesses in that area, in that section, would be discussed. Yeah.
I have a question. So it takes, in order for us to change this, even with the existing structure that we have set up where we ask for alternative ideas, and what I'm hearing is 2/3 and 1/2. So is it 2/3 or is it 1/2?
Depends on the section. So
Depends on the section.
if you're in the first phase of the industrial park,
Okay.
which is gonna be from Main Street to TT, that's all 50% plus the board of square footage. So, like Thompson Metals, Gardan, SCP,
Okay.
they all have probably a higher vote than, the Las Vegas.
So
yes.
what I'm hearing is that any proposal to change this is going to require acceptance by the neighboring property, industrial park property owners as well.
Right.
Or a percentage of them anyway.
Yes.
Okay, so even if just, say, like we had 5 at the last meeting, even if just those 5 come in, that may or may not be enough property owners to change it regardless of what we wanted to do.
Potentially. I think the second phase is probably the potential one where you got one property owner that owns probably more than 60%. So,
And that's only 2/3.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
So what I'm hearing is that the business owners probably need to contact their neighbors as well.
I would suggest that if you're trying to
lobby them to
Right.
their side
Right.
of a potential solution.
yeah.
That's the thing, I don't think it has to be sides. I think we can just work on it together.
And then did you say you found a few more that were in violation?
Yep. There was a few that we couldn't tell from the road, and kind of couldn't tell that well from the GIS, that are added in, that basically they would get a letter stating, you're currently out of compliance. Here's a meeting, we're discussing this. Basically, they'll have a
So we
little.
should make sure we've got them all.
Yeah, because I think it's important for the ones that don't know that they're out of compliance, to know they're out of compliance before that meeting, so if they do want to vote, they have their say and they know where they stand and they know that they should come to that meeting if they wanted to change. Yeah.
In changing the covenants, do we have the ability to standardize, instead of it just being 1/2 and 2/3, to have it all be one? The same?
I think you could probably change, I didn't look at it for that specific question, but I think that's to make any amendments to those documents, correct? That's just
I mean,
under
it
the
seems
amendments
weird to
section.
have it, it would make it
To
a
amend the
percentage of the
amendment
whole
portion.
thing versus here's the old half, here's the new half. It just seems weird.
Does the village have any other covenant? I mean, this was unique because of the industrial park.
Right.
But is there something else that could potentially pop up? Because now we're kind of opening this up, and there's gonna be somebody that's gonna come forward, maybe somebody who remembers something years ago. I don't know.
Like in these covenants or something else, like
Are there any
elsewhere?
Other areas of covenants.
Any other areas that
The
the
only
village
areas-
is involved in a covenant?
I think these are the only ones that we are actually, that are ours,
Okay.
which was done.
Normally it's neighborhoods, normally it's.
Right, it's subdivisions, it's usually
Right.
developers, most new developments have them.
So it's the property owner, so like the neighboring residents, so if somebody had a complaint, they're not any part of this vote, but they could certainly come to a public
So
meeting.
you are the representative,
I-
that's how, yeah. So they don't have, they can speak if you guys allow them to have a public hearing on it, but for the vote portion, they wouldn't participate in that.
Okay.
We would be their representation.
Does the village own any property in that?
The one small piece, well, a decent sized piece for stormwater, basically. That's about it. The rest is all sold off.
And that would still have to be in compliance, that's not hard surface now?
No.
Who has the village's vote? I mean, you know what I mean, like who votes on behalf of the village property?
The
The board then
board
also?
does.
Okay.
So that one road is still gravel too.
Hmm?
Stock Street is still gravel as well.
Yeah, Stock Street, that's gonna take, I gotta get, the information over to our legal counsel, cause there's some issues with the way that, I think the street goes through to the edge of the village, where it currently is showing that it's the current property owners. So that's gotta get kinda looked at by our legal counsel, before going anywhere with that. And basically, that's part of the reason D&K was also kind of sat to the side, because it makes no sense for us to force him to put it on asphalt when we don't have a road connecting to him asphalted. And he also has 15 months in some of the areas because of a new construction. You have 15 months after newly construction is finished to basically asphalt or cement.
One more thing that I wanted to bring up. I mean, it seemed at the last, when this first came up, that after speaking to each of them, they said that you suggested you can write a letter of variance. That was the next step that was available to them. So they did their letter of variance, and then I remember legal said this sounds like it could be more of an amendment, and I would have preferred to have it be voted on that night as let's amend this, because I know it was a variance request, but that's what we were, now they are doing 120 days of mental hoops.
Yeah, so I follow covenants. I don't know the law, and how it's implied, and how this would be handled. So I had to go off of the variance the way it's written. Granted, they wrote it as a variance. It probably should have been a special exemption or something like that, which would be allowed potentially. I don't know, but that would be a legal question. I don't know those normal. So a variance is odd to me that it was in there written as that, but that's how it's written. So that's how it was brought. It wasn't until it came to the meeting when basically the attorney basically stated that she was concerned about the words, which, we know, but I don't know if it was not enforceable until basically she says it, so.
Well, and, yeah, so there's potentially some delay here, but if this gives you finality, if it gives the property owners finality and they feel secure in how they can move forward, I think that was a worthwhile endeavor. Let's do it the right way.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Could we have a discussion where the property, owners in the industrial park, which it was set to be for employment and industry, have a discussion where we're not, kind of told that we only get the 5 minutes at the very top of the hour and then don't get to discuss our issues?
That's why we extended this out to the 120 days, and then we're going to have a public hearing with the businesses, any residents that want to attend, our planning and zoning, our board. That's what this meeting would be about then on August 8th. And then you could speak, and it's a public hearing, so you can speak and we can converse back and forth.
I don't see why the public is allowed when we purposely built in an industrial park. Why are we allowing people from Wild Winds to now make decisions on our industry when Wild Winds subdivision started second?
Well, they are not making decisions.
No, but in a public hearing,
They are coming and
start
they have
to
the
change it.
opportunity to speak in an open forum. This body cannot limit or prohibit who participates in its meetings. So they're doing this as an opportunity for you to come and to have a discussion with the board, but also the neighboring property owners would be entitled to appear at that meeting. And there's nothing that we could do to prevent that. But the property owners are the ones that have the vote. The board has a vote. those neighboring residents would not
So the property owners in the industrial park,
have the vote.
and it seems like we have some very mixed rules as to one time there's a variance allowed, and now there's not a variance allowed that's legal. That industrial park 1 versus industrial park 2 has different rules.
Yep, so we're gonna try and fix that, so it doesn't continue to be a problem for the next 100 years.
Well, I'm worried about 30 years in our business of 30 years that we're highly vested in. And the huge investment we've made, what Thompson Metals has made, what everyone else in the industrial park has made to run a successful business and employ people from this area.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why this is being scheduled for you, for
Yes.
the benefit of those property owners. I'm not disagreeing with anything that you're saying. I understand it, and I think that this is the proper way to go about it.
Is it the word public? I think that when you hear public hearing, like it's just called a public hearing even when it's like a group of people, but anybody can speak, but generally it's the people who are invested in that. So is it the word public that is
Yeah, I
maybe?
don't think that surrounding homeowners should be allowed to discuss and have their voices made on a huge investment that we purposely built into the industrial park, which is why most of us built in the industrial park to help prevent these little nuances. And I guess I would like to see if this, complaints like this should be legitimate. Has anybody invested this complaint? Was there actual huge amounts of dust?
It doesn't need to have any dust. We didn't need to investigate it. There was a violation of the covenants, similar to an ordinance. I have to go, if there is, I follow the paperwork, it gets filed. It doesn't matter. The guy could have had no dust on his property and just said that he knows that these are out of compliance with our code or with our covenants, and I have to go and follow what prior boards and prior citizens basically came together and said this is what we want for our covenants for this industrial park prior to it being made. So unfortunately, it doesn't necessarily matter if there was dust in the air at all. If someone knows that there's a violation and they call it in, we have to enforce it. It happens a lot with ordinance violations and everything, so. Unfortunately, it doesn't necessarily matter if there was a large amount of soot or dust in the air that it was going in this guy's property.
One simple question, can you I'm clarifying the thing on Industrial Park 1 where it has to be 50% or more of the landowners in favor plus the village board, or plus the village. So if we have 51% of the business owners say, we're okay with altering the covenants, but then the village board says, we're not okay, how does it? Or does
Then it doesn't
the
change.
what's that?
Then it doesn't change.
So we could have 99% of the business owners say we want to change the covenants, but the village board says we don't want to change covenants, and then it doesn't do any good. Okay, that's clarified, all right.
Are we good to move on? Okay, we will go to I, discussion and reporting of complaints given to board members.
This was another topic brought up by board member.
Thanks. It was actually a really nice segue there. My opinion about complaints given to board members is this. If the complaint isn't logged in a village database, it can't be acted on for use or used for discussions. Otherwise, it is not generally admissible, the same as hearsay in a court. There's no way to verify or examine the accuracy of the statement. And I want to see like a log of something, like it just.
Maybe this is for the attorney. Are there any other municipalities out there that have a like, didn't we have on the website a while ago where you could submit concerns and that kind of thing?
It's still there, I checked it.
It's still, okay, so, but if a board member receives that kind of information, could that information be funneled into, because I'll get a call on things, or I'll get somebody that approaches me about something, whether it be a compliment or, you know, a complaint, especially if it's a complaint, and I can bring it up to the board as a future agenda item. But if, let's say we're all getting the same complaint, or let's say, I can say it was a dozen people, but I don't have any record of anybody calling me, I have nothing. So is there any way we can log this, or have a way so that we have data to use when we address complaints? I mean, I'm trying to go back
I
to
guess
what
I
we have
don't
on the web.
understand, what do you mean by a complaint? Like somebody calls and there's something wrong with the sidewalk, kind of a complaint?
The
or-
general form where where John Smith said, yeah, my sidewalk is cracked.
Yeah.
And we write it down and we
So
give it to you.
I think a better question is two-part. One, could you compel board members to submit any complaints from a resident that comes up to them, whether they want it to be anonymous or fully disclosed, to every other board member to disclose their information? And two, could you restrict us, the board members ourselves, from bringing up or discussing anything that someone said to us that we didn't necessarily divulge who said something to us? So if somebody comes up to me and says, I don't like that stop sign down on Mill Street. If I have a dozen people come up to me and say, I don't like that stop sign down on Mill Street, what Grace is saying is, I shouldn't be able to bring that up. I shouldn't be able to talk about it. We shouldn't be able to put it on here unless I can come up, and there's a form that's filled out by all 12 of those people saying that they want the board to talk about this.
I didn't read it that way.
Well, that's what I read, because she said we shouldn't be able to discuss or bring those up as topics if there isn't a documented complaint.
I read it as, we absolutely can still bring it up, but then when we have that discussion, we have some kind of data that says, yeah, actually, we've got several complaints on this. I read it as that, and maybe Grace, you can clarify. That's how I read it. I didn't read it as we couldn't.
It's like validating the source.
But don't we pitfall then if we don't have it, then it's not a valid complaint? Doesn't it work both ways?
We just do it.
Yeah, that's.
I'm just asking, because if we're saying, what I just read, you just say was that, you know, in court, it's basically hearsay unless someone documents or has a document of it. So I want to protect us from saying, okay, if we don't have those 12 people or 5 people, then it's no longer, if a tree falls in the woods.
How about just one? Like, this is the topic up for discussion, from this generic form, I see that on April 20th, this became a point of interest. It doesn't have to really be 12, but if you saw that 12 people were concerned about the stop sign on Mill Street, and that was documented every time, I mean, that's not bad information, it's just information.
But how is that different, I guess, from it coming up in future topics and being in the minutes? I mean, how is that not the same saying it's documented because it came up in the minutes?
I think that I'm probably missing, I don't have the full background here, but with complaints, when you receive a complaint from a citizen, depending on the nature of the complaint, the severity of the complaint, and the form in which it comes to you, that can create legal obligations to take certain action. So, like Nathan was saying, when he gets a complaint about a potential code violation, and most of our code enforcement is complaint driven. We don't have people driving around the village looking for violations. We receive a complaint, we have a duty to then go out and investigate. And the scope of that investigation matches, again, the nature of the complaint. I don't think that it would be a good idea to try and create some sort of log where every complaint becomes an actionable item. So, hey Jim, I don't like the stop sign on this intersection. Now we're gonna put that into a database. And somebody, years from now, gets in an accident, they sue the village, they're gonna look back and say, hey, the board knew that this was dangerous, and they didn't do anything about it, even though at the time, maybe we didn't have enough to foresee that whatever ultimately happened could happen. So when complaints come in, I think as a matter of course, those individuals should be directed to the proper person on staff. How they are documented, how they are responded to, should be a decision that's made either by staff or, if they don't feel that they can respond to it, then by the board as a whole.
I guess I'm seeking for something, I hear what you're saying, and that is all making sense. I just, something to validate, like, some of these topics, where they, I just think,
Give something specific. I mean, is there a specific topic that we've talked about? And that, I guess that's where I'm reaching right now. I'm trying to remember if there's a time that we've talked about something and having that information.
I remember when Claire, who's my sister, obviously got her parking adjusted, and there was a lot of curious, what was the origin of the complaint? And that
Some of it
question-
was board members on the board at the time who drove by and had issues with it. So
What was the concern?
it was crossing over the center line, like we've talked about at length on that area. It was the shrinking of the bridge, the narrowing of the road, and then to have parking on that side, plus you have cars coming, you have to go into and cross over
I know
the
that-
center line.
Yes.
Plus
I'm
the-
aware that's the issue, I get that. But
Right.
when there was like, I don't understand why this is happening, who said something, I don't remember. I don't think that stuff came up until later in the process.
Right.
So is the question, does there need to be a complaint for it to be an agenda item? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
No. I mean, you as elected officials are responsive to the residents of the village. And if they don't agree with what's on the agenda or the decisions that are being made here, their recourse is at the ballot box. But if there's an item that's on the agenda and we don't have a certain resident that we can point to that for whatever reason prompted that action item, that's okay. That's not required. That's not a prerequisite. And complaints can be made anonymously as well.
Yeah.
But you're not.
Normally, a complaint just starts an investigation into an issue. It doesn't necessarily say that I'm gonna bring it to the next meeting with a proposal and it's gonna be voted on that meeting. It's usually a little more lengthy to discuss and get input and look at that area, not just from the one complaint, put it on. So it is usually looked at, each of them, way before they come in and get onto the agenda.
So that feedback form, is it really feedback? I can't remember exactly what it's all asking.
It's a content submission form. The new website has a little more features that allows people to complain and actually pinpoint it on a map where an issue is. It's nice. It's usually when we get a complaint, we handle it. It's normally stuff that staff handles. It's not, I don't think,
Yeah.
I
It's not
can't
really
actually think of a
board-related,
single
so-
time that we've had a complaint that had to come to the board. I
Okay.
mean, most of it is little things.
Most
like-
of it is ordinance violations, like say,
Right.
I have tall grass next to me,
Yeah.
there's rats and mice
Mhm.
and
School
coon
issues.
and everything else coming out of this, then our public works department looks into it and a letter gets sent out because you are violating an ordinance. So most of it is taken care of by our staff.
So to complete my thought, I guess what I'm saying is, if people are using that form, and if something would pop up that is potentially a board-related topic, it would pop up as a potential item on the agenda, right?
Yeah.
Due process with that, right?
Right, because otherwise we'd be, I mean, if they don't get action from us, normally they go to you, and then we're under the microscope for why did you guys,
And shame on me, I've
Right.
never gone out to the form. So I should go out to the form, but is it an anonymous type of thing, or do you have to submit contact information?
Well, even if you do, I mean, you don't have to do any, I mean, there's no way to verify that
No
this
way to
person
verify.
is real, they live in the village. There's no way to verify the email is even active. I mean, realistically, it's, you could have people submitting anonymously and, you know, could be Jim Bob submitting a complaint.
I just asking for that avenue, you
Right.
know, if there was that avenue out there, if somebody did have a complaint
Yeah.
or something, that if they wanted it, it can go that way. And shame on me, I've never gone out to the form. I will.
So we, as board members, all travel in different circles in the community, and that's a good thing, because otherwise we would have a limited set of ideas and viewpoints to pull from. So we have a nice diversity that we pull from different people, and some people are more comfortable coming to one board member than they are to another. And a lot of times, people don't necessarily want to be identified, and that's okay. A lot of times, some of the comments I hear are very colorful.
Me too.
And I filter them when I come to the board meetings, right? I try to maintain a professional message. But unless someone specifically came to me and said, I want you to tell everybody I said this, I'm not running around with a consent form saying, you know, do you consent for me to use your name, right? I mean, we have the electronic submittal on the website, which the board instructed staff to do, which I've looked at. We have all of our emails and all of our phone numbers are published. The staff emails are published. The village has a phone number. We have a 5-minute thing that you can do here. And we all live in the village, and we see people, and they can all come up to us. But if they don't want to be known who they are, then, I mean, there's some really easy reasons why. I mean, if your next door neighbor is not mowing their lawn and you want to complain about it, you probably don't want your name out there saying, hey, you know, can you tell my neighbor to mow the lawn so he can be really pissed at me? I mean, you go to the board and say, hey, can you guys work on enforcement? And then we, as board members, come and say, can you go look at these properties and, you know, and let them know that they need to take care of their lawn, right? There's a lot of really good reasons why people don't necessarily want to, you know, have their name attached to something. And that doesn't discount that doesn't dilute or discount their opinion or concern. And it also doesn't do the same to the board member when they're bringing those concerns in front of the board. So to speak down to, well, you know, they didn't talk to me. Well, they don't talk to everybody. I mean, Grace's latest example was the Bath Street and what's the intersection? Lincoln. Stop signs. Nobody called me. Nobody called, you know, the other board members. They spoke to you, right? Because they were comfortable speaking to you.
And I could give you the time, and
that's the way it is.
I could verify it.
It doesn't matter. Sometimes people are okay with it, but it's still okay if they don't, if they're not.
There's a little room for ambiguity, like, and transparency, not being just a check and a balance for.
There's no such thing. I mean, that you can't force everybody to put their name on the dotted line. And if you're gonna, and you can't force the other board members to not say anything about it. Because you can't restrict my speech here just like anybody else, just like you can't restrict anybody else's.
So are you saying you want a name assigned to a complaint to make it verified?
No, I'm pro anonymity. That's a wonderful thing. And if someone was comfortable with their name getting used, that's for them to decide too. I just, it would improve the transparency of the process that I've observed, but I have gathered that that's not possible from a legal standpoint. If there's a log of things that comes with its own catch-22 as well.
Yeah, I think that it would just be problematic you would be potentially building a case against yourselves that would be used against you.
I mean,
unavoidable and probably unimaginable things happen.
I mean, I'm thinking of what Pat shared with Nye Street being an issue for years. I mean, if, I guess you would not want dozens or hundreds of papers on that, but it would also be a little bit of like, yeah, this is, we have hundreds of residents saying, it'd be a nice paper trail, but I understand that that cannot exist.
The residents could go out and do a petition if they want. So that's always allowed for them to petition the board and come with signatures. That's usually a good way for residents, if it's something they really want, to go around and they can get signatures and bring it to the board and say, I got, 70 signatures of residents that live in Brookwood that would like the Nye Street to be at 25 miles per hour. If she came in with that, that gives you guys a little more evidence, but that's on them to basically come in and show that to you if the board is skeptical of something. But that is always an option.
Yeah, I get that.
Okay, are we good to move on? Okay, we'll go to 10, report of village officials. A, clerk treasurer, Jane.
My report was in the packet, and I did include the first quarter financials in Excel. And there was a memo written on that, because there's some negative numbers in there, but that's all been fixed. It was fixed in April, so it doesn't show up.
Does anyone have questions for Jane? Okay, we'll move to B, director of public works, Aaron.
My report is in the packet. We just wanted to comment that our kayak lift, or our kayak rental station is in and functional. So if any questions come up about it, it is ready to go. You just use your cell phone and scan a QR code, thank you, that's on there, and everything's done through your phone, and it's $20 an hour? $20 for
2 hours.
$20 for 2 hours.
And that goes to a 15-minute interval.
After 2 hours. So it seems to be, from a Facebook post that we put on it, a lot of interest in it, so it's available for the public now.
Any questions for Aaron? Okay, we'll move to C, police chief, Chris.
And my report was in the packet.
Does anyone have questions for Chris? Okay, we'll go to D, library director. Her report is in the packet. E, attorney, Ashley. Okay. F, administrator, Nathan.
My report was sent out on Monday. Most of the last week's been basically prepping, trying to get the developer's agreement done and finished before the property sold, I think, tomorrow. So that was most of my week. Other than that, just starting to get a lot of our stuff in line for construction this summer. Yeah, that's about it.
Any questions for Nathan?
Well, we
Okay.
did meet with our consultant for the engineering behind Main Street. So we walked with Ayers basically downtown today. Kind of took a look at the areas behind Main Street on the north side and the south side to get ideas. They're basically going to be meeting with the business owners at an upcoming meeting to kind of just discuss what their thoughts are on each of the sections and what they would like to see, and kind of brainstorm with them. So
Okay. We'll move to G, building permit report, and it is in the packet. H, any other miscellaneous topics for future discussions? Anything? Okay, we'll move to 11, communication and miscellaneous business. A, Black Otter Lake District News. Aaron, did you have anything?
Yeah, so we met last week. One of the topics we discussed was this weekend, the Fox Wolf Watershed Alliance is doing their lake cleanup at Alonso Park. We also discussed, we got 3 proposals for our RFP that we had out for doing a watershed study for the lake. there was a tentative approval of EOR and Associates, who also included within their proposal doing a model of basically in-lake phosphorus. So looking at the watershed and the sediment and phosphorus that's coming in from the watershed, but also the sediment that's already in the lake, modeling the kind of interaction that the phosphorus is going on in there to look at different ways that we can try to cut down on algal blooms and weed growth and things like that. So there's a tentative approval of them. There was an ask that we reach out to them and see if they could also include some hydraulic analysis for culverts that need to be replaced on the Whitewash Trail as well within their proposal. So I've contacted them. They're looking into it and how much extra that would cost. When they come back to me with that cost, it will come back to the board for final approval.
Okay. Any questions for Aaron?
And the next meeting is scheduled for 5:30 on May 20th.
May 20th? Okay.
Thank you, Nathan, by the way, too.
Okay, we'll go to B, Hortonville, Hortonia Fire District News. Jim?
We did not have a meeting, but the fire department is having their summer kickoff, May 18th, from 3 p.m. until 12 a.m. They're gonna have kids' activities and a cornhole tournament and Dustin Lee and Ask Your Mother for music and dancing, as well as some cash raffles and food and drinks.
Okay. C, Gold Cross Ambulance Run and Report and News. There is none in the packet. D, Hortonville Civic Association. Jane?
Have nothing new.
Okay. E, Senior Activities Committee. There is no report in the packet. 12, comments and suggestions from citizens present. Is there anything? Okay. 13, I would need a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are now adjourned at 7:52.